Okay, so there was this, IDW comic series, but do y'all really want to know about this? No. This is going to take a lot more time. Plus, this is new, not really to the past. So, I don't think we're going to read this one.
It is I, Aku, the shape-shifting master of darkness. Why have you stopped reviewing? There is much more to see.
Because I didn't want to review the feature comics. I only wanted to talk about the ones that I grew up with from my childhood. The ones that are nostalgic.
Foolish YouTuber. You must continue.
Alright, fine. We'll talk about the IDW comics. Back in 2013, IDW Comics partnered with Cartoon Network to produce many different comic books based on their properties, one of which was Samurai Jack. The creator of this specific comic, Jim Zub, wanted fans to take his IDW series as a sort of closure to its animated counterpart. This was of course a few years before Adult Swim would partner with Gindie to release the real and final season of Samurai Jack. Samurai Jack and the Threads of Time. We begin our story seeing Jack travel in a desert as he finds a small hut. He enters, stating he is seeking knowledge from Soul the Seer. He is interrupted by a mysterious man saying they already know who he is and they can give him the information he wants, but it would be meaningless as he would be killed by the cursed scorpions of the Scorching Sands. To the surprise of the mystery man, Jack has already defeated the scorpions. The man tells Jack in order to return to his time, Jack will require the magic of the Threads of Time. When the universe was formed, the gods marked time with an artifact known as the Rope of Eons. As it would wound itself, so wound forward history. When Aku wanted to understand the sorcery of time travel, he sought out the Rope of Eons and stole it from the heavens. Once he had mastered the chronal knowledge within, he shredded the rope so others could not benefit from its existence. But Aku did not know that the fibers left behind, the Threads of Time, still carry time-traveling magic. If you find a single thread, it will pull you towards the others. If you find them all, you can rewind the rope and rewind your place in time. And so, Jack ventures to find the Threads of Time. First, Jack finds himself in a battle arena for warriors and gladiators, and has to fight and claim victory for the first thread. After winning against the gladiators, the thread Jack won begins to show him the direction of the next thread. Jack is leaded into a village that is protected by a pair of twins named Dis and Dat. After Jack's defeat to the twins, the thread in his possession shows Jack that the twins have more threads inside their clothes, which is why they were so synchronized in battle. Jack confronts them a second time and easily defeats them, gaining their 2 threads. Jack is now led to a village called Grantis, where he meets the guardian and champion named Glower the Great. However, it turns out the village was just an illusion, created by the thread carried by Glower, as the village was destroyed long ago by Aku's robots, and Glower's life was taken as well. However, his spirit was attached to the thread, and he continued to guard Grantis even as a spirit until Jack encouraged him to move on. Jack now finds himself in a village that is colder than any place he's been before. It is there he confronts Queen Crystal, the Ageless, who Jack believes has the next thread. Jack is quickly defeated by her guards and is put to work in the royal kitchen. Inside, Jack meets the mayor of the town before Queen Crystal took over. Together, they plan a takeover and hide inside the cake meant for the queen. Jack defeats her guards and chops off her hair, which contained a piece of thread, and the queen, who was once ageless, had turned old and scrawny. Time passes, and Jack has gathered all but one of the threads of time. Jack finds himself at Aku Corp to find the final thread. Jack surprises Aku in his lair and begins to attack him. However, once Aku finds that Jack is gathering the threads of time, he goes in for the kill on Jack. The threads stop time and make Jack an offer. They can take him back to the past, but with Jack's fatal wounds, he will not survive. Or they can take him back to before he was struck by Aku, and he can live to find another way. Jack chooses the latter option and flees Aku's lair as the magic from the threads of time is no more. Samurai Jack and the Scotsman's Curse. Jack is asleep in the wilderness when a strange shadow attempts to attack him. It's the Scotsman. Apparently, when traveling for a gift for his wife's birthday, he came across a group of mysterious people that turned Scotsman into a woman. Jack travels with Scotsman to find whoever is responsible. On their journey, Scotsman reveals to Jack that in his encounter with the mysterious people who turned him into a girl, he might have been drunk. It's revealed that leprechauns are the ones responsible for the curse on Scotsman, and they did it because he came trying to pick a fight, so they turned him into a girl. Scotsman attempts to fight the leprechauns, but Jack opts to solve this without violence. The leprechauns agree to turn Scotsman back into a man if they run off a giant named Cuchulainn the Cruel. In order to make sure Jack does the task, the leprechauns turn him into a girl as well. Jack and Scotsman find Cuchulainn and manage to defeat him. Cuchulainn lets out a cry in defeat so loud it manages to break the spell set on them by the leprechauns. It turns out Cuchulainn the Cruel is actually Cuchulainn the Cool, and is actually a pretty good guy. Realizing they've been tricked, Jack and Scotsman go back to the leprechauns with Cuchulainn, saying they've slain the giant, while it's actually a trick as Cuchulainn screams and blocks out their magic spells, and they teach them a lesson. Samurai Jack and the villainous Vortex. Jack finds himself in a forgotten wasteland with rocks covered in hieroglyphics. It is then that Jack hears a noise and begins to get sucked into a hole in the ground where a giant spherical robot attempts to kill him. Jack destroys the robot, and it's revealed that it was being controlled by none other than Aku himself. Samurai Jack and the Brain Battalion. Piggybacking right off the end of the last story, we saw Aku enraged that Jack continues to thwart his schemes. He decides to instead attack Jack's mind and sneaks into his ear while he's asleep and begins to travel through Jack's memories. However, Jack proves to be more of a match even in his mind, so Aku decides to go back even further and attack Jack before he even becomes a warrior. But even then, Jack shows Aku that no matter what, when, or where, he will always be ready to fight him. Jack awakens and discards Aku from his ear, unaware of what really happened. Samurai Jack and the Quest of the Broken Blade. Jack encounters an old man who says he can reconnect Jack with the past by using the steel from his magic sword. The old man agrees to perform a ritual on Jack in hopes to restore balance to the universe. They travel to a faraway temple in order to enact the ritual, but are attacked by the Guardians. These hellhounds give Jack a struggle, but he manages to defeat them. The ritual, though, unfortunately fails due to the old man letting out a harsh cough, and it causes the spirit in Jack's sword to fade, and his sword is now broken. We see Aku in his lair as he feels a slight spiritual disturbance, signaling to him that Jack's sword is now gone. He calls to all the people in his land, promising them money, land, and whatever else they desire to kill Samurai Jack. Jack is hunted for what seems like months at the very least, as he has now grown a full beard. Hopeless, Jack recalls memories of his father, describing how the sword was forged by the mystical aid of 3 monks. Just then, a talking black bird begins to talk to Jack, telling him to come with him. On the flip side, we see one of the robots who attacked Jack manage to get a sample of his blood and brought it to Aku, and now they're able to track Jack through his DNA. Now, Jack is confronted by the 3 spiritual monks who see the sword was broken and now have to place judgment on Jack to test his worth. After a series of mental trials, Jack seemingly succeeds in being judged. However, after waking up, his magic sword is nowhere to be found, and it is then that Aku has found Jack. Aku lays a beatdown on Jack and almost kills him until a new sword emerges from Jack's very own soul. Using his new weapon, Jack causes Aku to retreat and swear his revenge until the next time they meet. Samurai Jack and the Master of Time. Jack attends some form of festival that's being held by a Master of Time, who says he's working on a time talisman that is supposed to return everything to its original place in the time stream. Jack sneaks in and hopes to reason with the Master of Time, but gets attacked by the guards. Jack tries to reason with one of the members, but is ignored and thrown out with the trash. He ends up meeting with someone you might remember from the show, the Thief. They agree to team up so that Jack can talk to the Master of Time. After numerous trials, they manage to reach the Master to inquire about the Time Talisman. It is then revealed that it was none other than just a sales pitch for a new watch he was trying to sell. Jack and the Thief leave disappointed. Samurai Jack and the Fallen Four. Jack finds himself in a new town, and a man who looks suspiciously like Gazpacho gives him some beans. He comes across an old woman claiming to sell orbs stated to power a time machine. Jack buys an orb and asks where he might be able to find such a machine. They take him to an old statue that's said to be able to open a time portal. However, it's all a trap set up by Aku, and the statue comes to life to attack Jack. Coming to Jack's aid are the original legendary warriors who once fought this battle many years ago. The fight goes on, but Jack remembers the beans given to him earlier and throws them into the water, causing vines to grow and tie around the statue, who Jack easily gives the finishing blow. Samurai Jack and the Mad Mutts of Misery. Jack is confronted by a mysterious dog who gives him a letter. Inside is a mission that if Jack agrees, the dog will take him to those who wrote the letter, which is none other than the 3 dogs from the original episodes. They're on the cuff of a new dog discovery and require Jack to aid them in their search. They reach a village that is known as the burial grounds of the first talking dog. When they arrive, they meet up with a lot of the worker dogs who say that they quit due to some noises beneath where they are working. Jack and company go to investigate and find the tomb of the talking dog, who angrily erupts from his slumber. The spirit turns the 3 dogs into uncivilized, growling, barking dogs who attack Jack. Jack offers dog treats as tribute to the spirit, and the curse is lifted. Samurai Jack, Mako the Scribe. We meet a man named Mako, who inscribes the words and deeds of important historical figures. He goes and talks to many people in different towns to try to find anything on the mysterious Samurai Jack, and can find nothing concrete. Finally, he meets a man who has met Jack, and he tells him of a tale of how Jack saved him and his child from Aku's robots. Curious of the scribe's intentions, he agrees to take Mako with him. They come to a secret hideout where almost everyone Jack has teamed up with in the past is there, and they're planning a secret assault. Mako pleads that he meet with Jack personally, and they agree to bring him. Mako meets a much older Jack, who tells him that he's since given up on trying to return to the past and only seeks to push ahead. As he tells the plans of his big assault, Mako narrates that he will never forget the words spoken on that day. Jack's legacy is larger than the man. The courage he inspires is real. And no matter what happens, these stories will live on. The legend will never die.
I actually like the IDW comics. While they're not perfect, but I think it gave us a great look at a different kind of Jack that was actually teased a little bit prior in the earlier seasons of the Samurai Jack cartoon. You know, that older Jack with the gruff beard and who's been clearly weathered by time. This is the one that we get in the comic towards the end. And we get a lot of character growth. It's not one who is continuing to look for ways back to the past. He's actually come to terms with the fact that he's probably stuck in the future for the rest of his life. So he uses this and decides to just continue to look ahead towards the future and strives towards that. So overall, I like the IDW comics. There. So are we done?
The next story about the samurai is a timeless classic.
Really? I have to do the spin-off too? Alright, fine. Let's talk about Quantum Jack.
Assuming that IDW couldn't just let the Jack hype die months after the end of Adult Swim's 5th and final season, Quantum Jack was released in 2017, written this time by Fabian Rangel Jr. Rangel's most notable work is on a comic called Doc Unknown, but has also written for famous puppeteer Jim Henson's The Storyteller, as well as even the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This comic is a mini-series to tell another Jack story, this time seeing different versions of Jack throughout space and time. Chapter 1. Our story begins with an alternate timeline version of Jack, as he's slicing up foes with his crew, as they are out to complete a mission that a man named Groog set them out to do, which was stealing some kind of crate with a person inside. After they reach their destination to trade off the device for the money, Jack chooses to defend it instead. Jack's own crew turns on him so that they can get the money, and Jack handles them with ease. Groog sends his army to attack him, as Jack is slowly seeing memories of himself from our regular timeline. He manages to defeat Groog and releases the person from the crate. They ask Jack for help, continuing their mission, which is being trained by the greatest warriors of the world. Jack replies that sounds familiar and gets flashes of his life as a child in the normal timeline. Jack then falls to the ground saying that something isn't right as he vanishes away. Chapter 2. We flash to another timeline where we see a bunch of wrestlers duking it out. Here we're introduced to Lucha Jack, who appears to be a much more self-absorbed version of himself. Jack jumps into the ring and is hit with a chair, causing him to see flashes of his samurai self fighting Aku's minions. Jack shakes it off as he continues to beat the toughest wrestlers in the ring, until finally they send in the champion, Demonio. Jack defeats the champion, and just as people are beginning to thank him, he fades away. Chapter 3. In another time, we see Jack as a pilot to a robot mech fighting with a giant monster. However, now it seems Jack has no memory of who he is in this timeline, and is unsure about how he got there, but will defend himself anyway. As he's hit, Jack gets more flashbacks from his samurai timeline. Jack is about to lose it, but his friends snap him out of it and remind him of who he is here. And Jack begins to reclaim his memories of this time. Jack defeats the beast and is congratulated. However, Jack is sure something is not right. He sees a robotic Grim Reaper who thanks him for his deed, as it allowed these slaves of Aku to continue their work. It is at this moment Jack vanishes. Chapter 4. Now we see that Jack and the Scotsman are nothing more than mere office workers having to keep busy under the watchful eye of their robot boss. After turning in an assignment, Jack is trying to remember his life as a samurai, but his memories are fading faster than he can gather them. Finally, the Aku-shaped clock strikes noon and it's time for lunch. Hours later, the Aku clock strikes again at 5 o'clock, telling them to leave. The voice emitting from the clock reminds Jack of the Aku from his samurai timeline, and he wonders what's happening to him. Jack travels to his home where he has a wife and children waiting for him. He has a nice dinner and watches TV where there's two versions of Aku that are competing for office, to which that shocks Jack's memory, and he tells his wife he needs his sword. Jack goes to his garage and manages to find his sword, and says goodbye to his family, as he feels there is something else more important he must do. Chapter 5. We have finally circled back to the original Samurai Jack before the events of the other timelines. We see Jack infiltrate an Aku fortress to save a doctor who invented a time ray. The doctor takes Jack back to his laboratory in the sewers, and he asks Jack how he found out about him. Jack explains that he saved a group of scientists from a monster, and they asked how they could repay him, and he asked if they knew of a device that could travel through time. They tell him of the doctor and how he was working on such a device. Jack asks the doctor to use the device on him, but the doctor explains it's unfinished. They are quickly ambushed by Aku, and Jack asks the doctor to use the device anyway. He does just that, and it causes Jack to see the multiple timelines we saw before, plus some new ones we didn't see. One of which appears to be the old grizzled Jack from the end of the IDW comic series. I wonder if that's the creators saying that the IDW series is merely an alternate timeline from Gindie's Season 5 that was later made on Adult Swim. We then see Jack's conscious go into the mind of a tiger, and that's where our story ends.
You know, I actually like Quantum Jack. I think that a lot of the themes that are discussed within the storyline of the comic are things that fit Jack and the world of Samurai Jack very well, In fact, one of my favorite parts in the comic is when Jack is finally, after multiple timelines, is finally coming to terms with the fact that, hey, wait a minute, this is not right. Something is definitely not right here. And he finally comes to terms with the fact that, oh crap, I'm Samurai Jack, I'm this samurai, and I need to get back. And it's at this moment that he has a wife and 2 kids, something that he says himself he's always wanted. So to see him have to part with that just to go back to something that he knows is the right thing to do, not necessarily what he wants to do, is, I think, some great writing. But I think that the story suffers a lot from some very iffy artwork. I think that the art, while not my cup of tea, is still definitely nice, but I don't think that it fits the world of Samurai Jack very well. I think it's also very Super Jail-esque in design. I just don't think it fits very well. But overall story I thought was pretty decent. Okay, we done yet?
The final tale is one thought forgotten.
And now we gotta talk about Samurai Jack Lost Worlds.
Samurai Jack Lost Worlds. Finally, in 2019, IDW released another miniseries called Samurai Jack Lost Worlds, featuring a few more adventures of Jack. Written by Paul Aller this time around, who has done a ton of work in the world of comics. Power Rangers, Star Trek Voyager, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Ghostbusters, and even Marvel Comics such as Avengers Gamerverse and Guardians of the Galaxy. This specific series seems to go and tie back into the original IDW series from 2013, Chapter 1. We start our story with what looks like to be one of the dogs who has helped Jack in the past, speaking of what happens to your identity when someone becomes more you than you are. We see a village that has become quite the Samurai Jack fans, as an individual claiming himself to be Jack is there. We see the true Jack looking from afar, and he decides to confront his doppelganger. Jack fears it is some demon or magical creature. However, after a tough fight, Jack decapitates his doppelganger to find out it was a robot created by some people in this village to teach others about the service and sacrifice and to live with the ideals that Jack had. Jack escapes and meets with the dog from earlier and says he needs to find his true self again. The dog sends him to a special room that will give him his answers. Chapter 2. We find Jack in a bar as someone offers to buy Jack a drink and join his friends. Jack kindly declines and says he must be on his way to the next village. They plead with Jack not to go, as the empty village, as they call it, is said to be haunted. Jack ignores their plea and goes to the village anyway, where he is attacked by an invisible foe. Jack takes a huge beating after being told to leave by the foe. However, Jack insists that he stays. Finally, Jack is knocked out, but awakens in a bed at the care of one of the invisible creatures, who was simply trying to scare Jack away. They are trying to make sure no one bothers them in their village, as they are the last survivors of a group of people from far away. They ask Jack to leave and say that their fate is in his hands. Jack is confronted by kids on his way out of the empty village, and he confirms to them that it's haunted and that they please do not go there. Jack is walking in a forest as he falls victim to a bear trap set up by actual bears. Jack tries to escape but ends up getting captured. He's thrown in the back of a vehicle with others they've captured as he's taken away. As they're driving, the bears communicate with their higher up to say that they've captured someone named Samurai Jack. They are quickly informed that they have the wrong person and intend to let him out. Meanwhile, Jack decides to team up with the people inside and they bust the door open and make their escape. The people inside manage to run away, but Jack remains. The bears apologize to Jack for taking him on mistake, but inform him that the other people inside were fugitives from the underworld. Jack offers to help retrieve them, but the bears just tell Jack to stay out of their way. Chapter 4. Jack boards a ship run by a man named Captain Arnold. The crewmates on the ship are split between two groups, one that believes that the Earth is round, and the other that believes that the Earth is flat. The captain believes it to be flat, and believes that they are reaching the edge of the world, where some of the strangest creatures inhabit the waters. It is at this moment that a giant octopus grabs both Jack and Arnold and brings them underwater. Jack manages to escape back to the ship, but it appears Arnold was eaten. Jack asks the second-in-command, who now assumes the role of captain, to take control of the ship. However, the new captain is afraid they've reached the edge as well. Jack is confident this is some kind of trick, and takes control of the ship himself, and drives it right over the edge, over the waterfall and into the ocean below.
Lost Worlds definitely, to me, felt like much DLC to the IDW comic, more than anything. It just kind of felt like, because it's not long, it's like it's about 4 or 5 stories, and they all kind of felt like they weren't needed, except the one about Mako the Scribe. That one kind of showed that perhaps the IDW storyline was actually an entirely different timeline, as opposed to being just scrapped non-canon altogether. But other than that, it just kind of felt more like bonus chapters from the IDW series. Not bad. I wouldn't say, unless you're a diehard fan, you should go out and get it. Because again, it just felt like bonuses. But, you know, that's how it is. Alright. I've done all of it. What else do you want from me?
It seems you have passed my trials. I will make my departure. We will meet again, YouTuber. But I will leave you with one final challenge.
All right, I'm free.